as you know, negotiators are currently meeting in Panama. It's the last negotiating session before the climate summit this year that will take place in Durban. And it seems to me, well, first of all, I don't know if you saw the quotes by Ivo de Boer in June. He was the former head of the UN Climate Convention, and he was the champion of the climate negotiations for all those years. And suddenly he came out in June and said, this process is dead in the water, it's not going anywhere. And that was a real shock. I mean, I don't normally like to emphasize sort of self-defeating comments like that, but in this case I sense that a number of people shared that concern. A lot of people, particularly when I come to the US, I find that a lot of people have said, you know, it's just hopeless to get the US involved in this. We're going to focus our efforts on something that might make more of a difference, you know, Keystone Pipeline, anti-coal campaigns, whatever. And so I felt that it was really important to remind people why we still need to have that climate agreement, because we can't change the science, we have to change the politics. And there are a number of reasons why we need that climate agreement. And for me, the most important one is the fact that it's really urgent. Because if you think about it, we need to see concentration of CO2 levels stabilize in the atmosphere at about 350 parts per million. We've all heard Bill McKibben and James Hansen say that 100 times, more than that. And right now, we've overshot the mark. We're at about 390 parts per million. So we need to see these emissions peak and then steeply decline thereafter. And the longer we wait to do that, the steeper that decline has to become. So it gets higher and higher, and to the point where you almost can't do it anymore and still level out at 350. The longer you wait, the more chance you're going to level out way higher. And then it's a real crapshoot as to what's going to happen and what kind of planet we're going to be inhabiting. So really, so if you think about that urgency, then you think, how is the fastest way to get that peak in CO2 emissions and that steep decline? And I think the most important reason you need an international agreement to do that is you can't do it so easily at the national level, one country at a time. Businesses say they need a level playing field. You get a patchwork agreement of, you know, emissions reductions, trading schemes, or carbon taxes, or whatever they are. You don't have that kind of level playing field across countries. It's just not the most efficient way to do it. Whatever you think of the carbon market, it is having an impact, and if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. There's a huge moral responsibility to do it in the interests of intergenerational equity, in terms of climate justice. We made a commitment 20 years ago when all of these countries signed up to the UN Climate Convention. They were going to limit temperature rise to a level that won't interfere with the climate. And you know, we're not living up to that commitment. So I think that it's really important that we remember that countries have got to do what they said they were going to do, and we hold them accountable to it. So first off, by committing to the second commitment period of the Kyoto Protocol. It's a bad word here in the U.S., but I'm sorry, the U.S. should just, you know, be quiet until they have something more constructive to offer. Other countries should stop listening to the U.S. on that score, and Europe keeps saying they're intending, they're willing to do it. They need to unconditionally say they are going to extend that, because it's the only internationally binding climate law that we have. Now, that doesn't mean we don't need more than that. We need something that will be legally binding for all major emitters at some point. But there needs to be, you know, countries need to figure out the mandate for that and a process and a timeline for doing that, but bearing in mind the convention's requirements that there be common but differentiated responsibility for different countries at different levels of development. And I think the other really important thing to break that deadlock is climate finance. Because, I mean, I live in the Netherlands, okay, so we learned the hard way, not before I was born, but we learned the hard way about storm surges. In 1953, there was a flood that killed 2,000 people, and as a result, they built the Delta Works, which cost 5 billion euros, and it protects the country from storm surges. But, you know, you have to wonder who's going to pay for that for low-lying countries like Tuvalu or Bangladesh. These countries did the least to contribute to the problem. And that's only one impact from climate change. There's lots of other ones. So until the countries that did cause that problem actually take responsibility for that and offer finance support to, you know, prevent those kinds of catastrophic impacts from affecting these countries, you know, a lot of the large developing countries will say, well, you know, we're not going to move until you take responsibility for what you've done. And they have a point.